Hello, church. So Classis has done something to encourage me, to dare me, if you will, to press us forward on mission. I know this is a time in which we've been so long on lockdown. It's hard to think about the future, and certainly we're a little bit unsure of it. But I've taken the dare. And so what we're going to do is do more than yourself being dared, but I am going to double dare you. And so there's going to be two different times of teaching, but also you engaging that teaching over the next hour or so. And so our first dare, our dare number one, is from a prayer. It is a dare about a prayer. Dare number one, this prayer comes from Matthew chapter 9, verse 35 to 38. And we're going to walk through this prayer. And one of the first things we notice as we read this prayer, begin reading this text, is what we find in verse 35. Jesus went through all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, proclaiming the good news of the kingdom and healing every disease and sickness. So this dare about a prayer, first of all, we notice it comes in the context of Jesus' gospel ministry, a ministry of proclaiming the good news and demonstrating the good news. And this ministry of Jesus is, of course, the very ministry of the church itself. And so we are kind of paying attention, say, wow, this is what Jesus did as he calls for this prayer. And so is also the context of the church itself. Let's read on. Verse 36. When Jesus saw the crowds, he had compassion on them because they are harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. And so the prayer we're going to read in a moment, this prayer that we are getting a dare about, it's the context of Jesus' gospel ministry, but it arises from the compassion, from the heart of Jesus for the lost, for those who are harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Here too, it is the heart of Jesus that is to be the heart of the church, the compassion for those, the move of the heart that is in Jesus that is to be in the church itself. Let's read on. So he's seeing the crowds, he has compassion on them. Verse 37, then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. Now we're really getting into it, right? It's comes from Jesus' gospel ministry, the church's gospel ministry. It rises from the compassionate heart of Jesus and the compassionate heart of the church. And it notices something. Jesus notices an abundant and ready harvest. Now, as we read that, we are kind of talking together about the challenges of the church, wondering, who's going to come back? Maybe we can be fearful about the actual size of our church. But one thing we cannot doubt is that the harvest is abundant. We were created to be in relationship with God. And as the time of COVID continues on, in fact, as people move more and more away from the gospel story, it does not change the truth that folks are lost and hungry for God. The harvest is even more abundant and even more ready than it's ever been in recent years. Now, with all of this reality, the gospel ministry, the heart of Jesus, the readiness of the harvest, you would expect that this shocking prayer that Jesus dares the disciples, ourselves as well, to pray, that this shocking prayer you would expect would be a prayer for more workers. Because the workers are few. He said the harvest is ready and abundant, but the workers are few. You would expect him to ask us to pray for more workers, but that's not what Jesus prays. What Jesus asks his disciples to pray. Listen to what he says. He says, the harvest is plentiful, but the workers are few. And he says this is a prayer. Ask the Lord of the harvest, therefore, to send out workers into his harvest field. Now, of course, this prayer is not against the idea that we're praying for more workers, but Jesus does not say that. I want to suggest to you that the punch of Jesus' prayer is not about a noun, more workers, but the verb, to send out. That is the punch of the prayer, to send out. In fact, if we were to look at the Greek behind that word, ask the Lord of harvest to send out, it is the Greek word ekbalo. And that word is used elsewhere in the Gospels when Jesus is casting out demons, right? It's sort of a very forceful, intentional, and powerful work of Jesus to throw out, to cast out the demons. And so he uses the same verb in his challenge, his dare to us to pray, that we would pray that sort of same forceful prayer. Not so much for more workers, but that the workers, the Christians that are following him, would be propelled, one might even jokingly say, drop-kicked into mission. Would you dare to pray that prayer? What if we prayed that God would drop-kick us into his mission? Not a passive verb in that at all. Would your church dare to pray this prayer? I mean, what if your church had this kind of culture of daring as we move forward in mission? What would that look like? Well, I'm going to offer to you a bit of teaching. It's stolen directly from Mike Breen's work from 3DM Ministries. He has books on discipleship, which I can share with you if you like. But he talks about the culture of the church, the culture of movement. He uses he calls the invitation and challenge matrix. So much can be said about this, but I'm going to try to be brief. What he talks about is that we can place our churches somewhere on this XY axis. X, if you remember your math class from high school, is the horizontal axis, Y being the vertical axis. What is your church like? Is it a place of high invitation? Right? That sense of welcoming and inviting and giving people a sense of belonging and community. Is it a place of challenge where people are challenged to grow in Christ and to step out in mission? Where does your church sit in one of these four quadrants? So the first quadrant here is imagining a culture in a church where there's high invitation and low challenge. People are welcome, they belong, there's just, so much, there's friendliness, real community, conversation happens, but not a lot of challenge happens. This is what you would call a cozy culture. Kind of reminds me of that commercial about teenagers growing up in your house and they don't ever leave, right? There's welcome, invitation, loving and belonging, but there's not the challenge to get out and step out on their own. He said the commercial is, you got to stop feeding them cheese. I guess cheese represents invitation. So that's a cozy culture. Is your church like that? Is it a high invitation and low challenge? But there's also a church that you can imagine, a culture in a church that's low invitation as well as low challenge. You come as a bunch of individuals. No one's really there. You're not really experiencing a sense of family or welcome. You're just kind of there. But then there's no challenge, so it's no big deal. But of course, that's what you would call a bored culture. People come and maybe they're not really sure, it's just a habit. No one's really there to love and be family, but no one challenges them. But people are just bored. Is that the culture that you might use for your church? The third quadrant in this invitation and challenge matrix is a quadrant of low invitation, but high challenge. I don't want to make this all about leadership, but often in leadership, this is what we experience as pastors, maybe as involved council members. You're not experiencing a sense of family and love and encouragement that much, but you're definitely being challenged to step out and to do new things or to work harder. Often leadership finds itself in this category. Now you might say, well, that's just leadership, but this leadership is the one that also creates culture for the church itself. Now, the fourth quadrant, of course, this is kind of prejudicing things a little bit, but this is this challenge, this culture of movement that has a place of high invitation, but also challenge to grow and to step out in mission, to be discipled, to walk closer with Jesus. This is the discipleship culture, the culture that Jesus called his church to be when he said in Matthew 28, that he said, in your going, make disciples who make disciples who make disciples. That is a place of invitation. Invitation, in fact, we would say that this discipleship culture is where invitation is first, right? Where welcome and love and belonging are not prejudiced by how you work the challenge, because that's a works righteousness culture, but it starts with grace and welcome. And really, one of the ways of thinking about it is that we bank invitation and spend it on challenge. All right, that's really brief, but what I want you to just think about this daring prayer, this challenging prayer that Jesus calls his disciples to pray. So here's the breakout room discussions. First of all, as you meet together, some of you are in your own sort of church groups. First of all, where is the culture of your church in the invitation and challenge matrix? Is it cozy or bored or stressed, or is it a discipling culture? And the second natural question is, what do you need to work on as a church? Is it more invitation or more challenge? And how are you going to do that? Okay, so what's the culture? What do you need to work on, and how are you going to do that? And so we look forward to that conversation, and we'll get back together real soon to go on.